Over on Twitter, one of the fun things people have been doing over the last couple of weeks is sharing 5 movies they consider perfect. And I thought that seemed like the perfect subject for a video. So here's 5 movies that I think are perfect. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share 5 movies that you consider perfect. Obviously, all of our lists are going to be different, and there's more than 5 movies that I could have included here. As I looked at what movies I wanted to put in this video, I wanted to include movies from different decades and different genres. That was the criteria for which movies I decided to include in this video. I also have a companion video to this over on Patreon with 5 more movies that I consider perfect. These aren't necessarily favorites, they're just movies that I think perfectly capture exactly what the movie was trying to accomplish. And with that said, let's get started with a thriller from the 70s, Jaws. One of the questions I frequently get asked is, should they remake Jaws? Likewise, there's frequently rumors that someone's trying to get a remake made of Jaws. And this is one of those films that I just don't think there's any way to improve the movie, either with the present day setting or with modern day special effects. The movie works as it is in a timeless fashion because it's not designed to be this big spectacle film. If they remade it today, they'd make it a big CGI fest, and we've already got that movie. It's called The Meg, and it's certainly not better than Jaws. But the original film captures all of the conflict and tension surrounding what if a shark did show up in this tourist town, the conflict that would go on in the decision making of should they shut down the beaches and worry about the damage that would do to the economy, should they risk keeping it open. All of those types of dynamics that are actually very relevant in light of the current situation that we're all in with the lockdown. But beyond that, it also has just amazing characters that represent different perspectives on how people would see all of these events and what they would value most in these scenarios. When we go out to sea and they're actually trying to capture the shark and take it out, it's exciting and thrilling. The score, while being incredibly simplistic, is one of the most iconic and memorable themes of all time that perfectly builds the tension that the movie builds. Steven Spielberg perfectly captured what he was going for, despite all the problems that happened on set. He nailed it. Next, we have the perfect action movie from the 1980s, Die Hard. This has gone down as the movie that spawned its entire own subgenre, Die Hard ripoffs, where so many movies have been called Die Hard on a Plane, Die Hard on a Bus, Die Hard at the White House. Countless movies have tried to capture the magic of this film, and not even the movies in its own franchise have come close to being as good as the original Die Hard, and so much of that just goes back to just a wonderfully crafted script, where everything that happens, everything we see in the first 20 minutes before the action starts has some sort of payoff later on in the film. Little throwaway lines of dialogue about John being afraid of flying and how to kind of overcome that when you get off it lead to him not having his shoes on, which has really important ramifications throughout the course of the film. And that's when you have a great film that kind of gets into that perfect category where everything is thought through. There's no throwaway lines. There's no throwaway shots. Then you have the iconic action hero that doesn't want to be the action hero. He's just the guy that happens to be there. He's not written to be a good man. He's not written to be a good husband. He's a deeply flawed person that just happens to be the perfect person to be stranded in this building, taking out terrorists. Then you have Hans Gruber, the ultimate action movie villain, maybe the greatest movie villain of all time. And Alan Rickman just plays him to perfection in just his smarminess, his sense of humor, how he's charismatic while being awful at the same time. And of course, John McTiernan knows how to stage action in big sequences to be exciting. This is the perfect action movie. And that leads us into the 90s with the perfect animated film, The Lion King. Now, I might have a little bit of age bias on this one as I was born in the early 80s, so I was the target audience for the Disney Renaissance as those films came out. There's like 4 of them in a row that are all kind of perfect films to me, but the one that has always been ahead of the pack for me is The Lion King. The music to it is so iconic and memorable, and all of the songs are good. Even the villain song is catchy and fun. Also, it has a nice sense of humor with the characters. You have quirky sidekick characters, childish activities at the beginning of it. And then at its core, there's kind of these Shakespearean influences on it that give it more depth than you'd expect from a film like this. And that's what elevates this film for me, is that it's true family entertainment. My 5-year-old, 6-year-old, they can absolutely love the childish humor and the songs and get fully invested in it. But at the same time, it's a movie that deals with regret and loss and taking on responsibility, which are themes that more connect with adults than they do for children. So there's something in this movie for everyone, and all of it is done incredibly well. And that's when you have the perfect family animated film. Then we have the perfect comedy from the late 90s is Galaxy Quest. Now, this is a movie that on the surface, you might think that it's for a niche audience because it's a little bit of a send-up of Star Trek and Star Trek fandom, but actually the movie works just as a comedy in and of itself. That's the thing that makes this movie so incredible, is that it is a love letter to Star Trek fans while having so much fun sending up Star Trek. And it's incredibly accessible. Whenever I first watched this movie with my wife, she was not someone that went to Star Trek conventions back in the day like I did. She wasn't someone super familiar with Star Trek and all the things about it, but she absolutely loved this movie, fell in love with the characters, and thought it was hilarious, and actually got more into Star Trek because of this movie. But at the same time, Star Trek fans absolutely love this movie. Many think it's one of the better Star Trek movies ever made because it works as kind of a Star Trek adventure that's paying homage to the original TV show from the 1960s. It's also sending up a bunch of the tropes from those films, as well as having fun with some of the egos and dynamics that played behind the scenes with the cast, while also having fun with fandom and telling us stories where the fans of the TV show get involved with it. That is so many different things and so many different audiences that it shouldn't work. It shouldn't tie together, and somehow it does. It's one of these movies that manages to find the perfect tone to apply to a very broad audience while covering a very niche subject, and that is when you know that you have something special on your hands. That leads us to the perfect bad movie from the year 2003, The Room. And this is certainly a very special movie. This is actually a bonus. I'll have one more that's actually a perfect movie. But to me, this is the perfectly bad movie because every choice made by Tommy Wiseau while he was making this was the wrong choice. The length of every scene, the plot, the acting, the choice to use special effects to shoot all the exterior shots, the way people behave, the inclusion of subplots, how over the top certain things happen, the length of the sex scenes, everything about this movie was perfectly wrong, while because it's so perfectly wrong, it's incredibly entertaining. It is the ultimate example of a movie that does everything wrong, but still manages to be wildly entertaining at the exact same time. It fully loops back around to not it's so bad it's good, but it's so bad it's great. And it never slows down. It's not like it's paced in such a way that it slows at certain windows of time. As soon as one thing starts to almost outstay its welcome, it moves on to the next horribly bad thing that it does wrong in a totally different way that's hilarious in a new way. This is a form of perfection in that it's the opposite of perfection and thus loops back to perfection. But that leads us to our actual final perfect film, a sci-fi action thriller from the 10s, Inception. This is a movie that from the very first time I saw it, I was just wowed by what Christopher Nolan was able to do with the script. The level of complexity to the mythology that he built was pretty remarkable. And after I left the film, to this day, people are still debating it. Like, I saw the movie 10 years ago. We're still debating exactly what certain things meant because it so perfectly manages to weave a narrative where there's multiple interpretations of what exactly happened at the end, what exactly was happening throughout the film, and what exactly does it all mean. And it does that as this very philosophical aspect to it with the deep, complex ideas about dreams and how the technology works. But it's also just an exciting action sci-fi movie that did unique, different things with the action sequences. One of the big standouts, of course, being the hallway sequence where the car's flipping, but deep inside the dream, the world is rotating in this hotel and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is fighting. And that's when you have a movie that I think gets to that next level when you're fully absorbed into it. It works on multiple different levels and you're debating it years later. Christopher Nolan and even his brother Jonathan are great at finding these interesting ideas about the human experience, whether it's about dreams or memory, time, and then finding a way to tell an exciting story that works as that exciting genre film while having these deep explorations of ideas and the human experience. That's why Christopher Nolan is the legend that he is. Even when maybe some of his films don't fully land, the ambitions are so big and he's doing things so interesting that it's hard to not be captivated by the stories. And with Inception, he had sky-high ambitions and he lived up to them. It works on all the different levels. It's captivating, it's interesting, it's ambitious. It is perfect. Be sure to tell me your picks for 5 perfect films down below in the comments. Remember, I have another list with 5 more films I consider perfect over on my Patreon page. You can find that at the link down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching and keep talking movies too much.